It's time for recipe of the day. Ground beef and cabbage. I'm so excited. I love this recipe. It reminds me of stuffed cabbage rolls, halapchi, whatever you call them. Kind of like those. But unlike the other lazy stuffed cabbage recipes out there, this one doesn't have rice in it. And that can sound like just a small difference, but I think it's important because you can then use this in so many different ways, right? So it can totally be the main part of your dinner. Ground beef and cabbage. It's got tomato flavors in it. I'm going to talk about sauerkraut, caraway, dill, all those things. But you can have it as kind of like the main thing, and you can have it over rice, or you can have it over mashed potatoes, or you could just serve it in a bowl with some crusty bread on the side. So you can do all those things. I also really love the leftovers of it as like a little side dish. So you can have it for dinner one night, and then a couple days later, it's just like a little stewed cabbage beefy side dish thing. Amazing like that. And then I also really, really love it. So when I was making this, something about the flavors, or I don't know, the cabbage with the meat, and there's a little bit of sauerkraut in there. Like I said, it reminded me a little bit of like a Reuben sandwich. It made me think of a Reuben sandwich. And so what I did was I took these hoagie rolls that I had, and I spread one side with some quick homemade Russian dressing, and then I melted some Swiss cheese onto the other side, and then I piled this onto there, and it was a delicious sandwich. So all of that to say that this is kind of like a lazy cabbage roll kind of recipe, kind of like that stuffed cabbage soup that I've told you about before, but because it doesn't have the rice or doesn't have the carbohydrate in it, it just is a little bit more versatile, but so much big flavor. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to make it with a couple little substitutions that I'll give you along the way as I'm telling you how to make it. So you're going to get out a Dutch oven or like your big sort of soup pot, and in it you're going to heat a tablespoon of cooking oil. That can be olive oil, vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, whatever you like to cook with. And then to that you're adding one large onion that you've sliced. I'm not sure why I like the strands of onion in here that you get as opposed to a little dice. I just like it. And then you're going to saute that over medium heat just until the onion softened a couple of minutes. Then you're adding in a pound of lean ground beef. Now, I use lean ground beef, 1 pound of it, usually when I'm making this. But if I want it to be like a heartier, meatier entree, you can go as much as 2 pounds of the lean ground beef, or a different kind of ground beef if you want. So yeah, the recipe works perfectly even if you double the amount of meat. It's just going to have more meat, and it's going to be like a beefier cabbage and beef dish, right? Now, whether you're doing the 1 pound or the 2 pounds, you can do 1/2 of that as ground pork. So you would do like 1/2 pound of ground pork, 1/2 pound of ground beef, or 1 pound of each. That works really well. And the other alternative is, of course, to use ground chicken or ground turkey for any amount of that. So lots of variations in there. So you're adding that, and you're also adding in 2 teaspoons of paprika, a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and you're stirring that in. Now for the paprika, we're just using a regular sweet paprika here, which is often just labeled as paprika on the containers that you're going to get at the grocery store. That's just your standard sweet paprika. It just is called paprika. But if you wanted to, you could use a little bit of hot paprika or a little bit of smoked paprika, but like a pinch of one or both. I wouldn't put too much more than that because they're very overpowering and really change the flavor profile of this dish. So my advice is really just to stick with the sweet paprika. So 2 teaspoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper going in, and you're cooking that over medium high, stirring occasionally until the beef is no longer pink, about 4 to 5 minutes. And then if there's any fat in the pan, you can tip it to the side and drain off the fat. Now, while that is cooking, your beef is cooking, you're going to get your cabbage ready. So it is 1 medium-sized head of green cabbage. Now, you could use red cabbage here. It's going to look very different. And I think red cabbage is actually kind of like a purple color, and there's tomato going into here soon. I find the coloring a bit strange and I don't like it as much, but it's going to taste great. So if you have a red cabbage and you want to do this, you can. You can also use a Savoy cabbage or Napa cabbage. They are all going to work here. The texture of the cabbage in the dish is going to be different, but they're all going to be delicious and they're all going to cook just fine in this recipe. So that was a medium head of cabbage, but you could instead use a 14 to 16 ounce bag of shredded cabbage. So that's sometimes called coleslaw mix. It often has like carrots and some red cabbage in there as well. That's all fine. But if you just want to dump that bag in there, it's going to be the right amount. One medium head of cabbage gets you about 7 to 8 cups, which is about the same as the 16 ounce bag. If you're not using a bag, if you're using an actual head of cabbage, you're going to cut it in half and then you're going to cut the core out, throw out the core, and then you're cutting the rest of the cabbage into 1-inch pieces. And I'm going to link to a little tutorial that I have for how to cut cabbage. If you've never done it before, you want to know how to cut out that core and you want to know how to chop the cabbage because it's kind of like big and unwieldy. You can go and look there. That link is in the show notes, or go to thecookful.com and search for cabbage. You will find it. Okay. So by now your beef is probably cooked. If you've drained off the fat, if you wanted to, you just finished prepping that cabbage. Leave that cabbage for a minute because you're going to add some tomato paste. And I find it easier to stir it into the ground beef, which is kind of like compact and small amount in your pot right now. Once you've added the cabbage, it's hard to disperse it as easily. So to the ground beef in the pan, you're adding 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, stir that in. Also add in 1 14.5 ounce can of diced tomatoes with their juice. And then optionally a teaspoon of caraway seeds. I love them in here, but I know that caraway seeds can be controversial. You know, some people love their seeded rye bread. Some people hate seeded rye bread. If you don't like caraway seeds, don't add them. Now, I will say the recipe does not say this, but I do like some fresh dill in here as well. Put a couple teaspoons of chopped fresh dill or a teaspoon of dry dill at this time as well. And give that all a stir and then add in your cabbage. And then you're going to bring that up to a simmer, still over kind of like medium-high heat, and then reduce it down to low, cover it, and cook until the cabbage is nice and tender, about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, it is pretty tasty just like this, but I love sauerkraut. And so there is an option to stir in 1 cup of drained sauerkraut at this point, and it's going to add a little bit of extra tang and some salt flavor to it. Okay. So stir that in before you taste to see if you want to add anything else to this. If you're not adding the sauerkraut, you're going to taste it and see if you want to add any more salt to the dish. Stir it in. And then, yeah, you're putting that on mashed potatoes, on rice, serving in a bowl like soup with some crusty bread, or you are putting it into those hoagie rolls. They're going to be like damp and messy, but like so good with the cheese and the Russian dressing and the bread. Love it. You're going to love this one. I know it. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date. So it's helpful to know that today is April 15th of 2025. And I'm going to remind you that I have this new offering on Cook the Story. It is to help with meal planning, and it is called Rotation Ready Recipes. And it comes with a printable meal planning guide and this like really interesting way to streamline your meal planning time. I'm going to start with some ideas already in place. So you've got to sign up for that. You can get it at cookthestory.com/courses, and you'll see it right at the top, Rotation Ready Recipes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.